I've done this a couple of times, having a Zoom webinar and then live streaming on YouTube.
Right.
And the benefit of doing it that way is that it's
I've
just
done this a
saved on
couple
on
of
the
times,
channel.
having a Zoom webinar and then
Oops.
live streaming on YouTube.
Let me
And
just
the benefit of doing.
so now I muted myself. So yeah,
Sounds good. All right.
let's just see here. So now we are live on YouTube and we are live here, and I will now start recording. All right, guys. So it's now 7 o'clock Danish time, and we are ready to start this webinar. And with me today, I have Carolyn Holzman, and Carolyn and I will have a small talk about how to index your backlinks. And I will start out by giving a short introduction to Carolyn. For those of you that haven't met Carolyn yet, Carolyn has been doing SEO for an amount of years, and I'll let you explain how many
15
years.
years, 16 years coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, and Carolyn and I, we actually met each other first time in real life here in Aalborg in Denmark, because I invited Carolyn to talk at the YAX SEO conference last year. It feels like it's 5 years ago, but it's only last year. And Carolyn gave superb presentation on SEO and indexing and advanced SEO stuff. And and indexing is one of these questions that I get asked most about. How do you index cloud stacks? How do you index cloud links? How do you index Web 2 links? How do you index scrapebox links? How do you index blog posts? How do you get anything indexed? And personally, what I use the most, of course, is various indexing services. I also have, if it's my own blog post, I have some things that I like to do. I like to share my blog post to Twitter or X, Facebook, as links in YouTube descriptions, stuff like that. And, yeah, ordinary stuff like that. But Carolyn, actually, she is also known, anyway, she's known by me as the Queen of Indexing. And Carolyn, you're known as the indexing super duper master because you have done extensive research on how Google actually uses, or on how Google actually indexes things, how they crawl our websites, what are they looking for, and what do you need to do in order to get into the index. And Carolyn, you recently launched your own indexing service also.
Yes. Yes.
But I think that's enough introduction for me now. So I would like to give the word to you, Carolyn. So first of all, how many years ago was it that you started doing SEO?
I was counting that the other day, because I think it's a full 15 plus a little bit into to the 16th year.
Yeah.
But I got into SEO because I had a business that did a very specific thing and was competing with national brands to do it. And I discovered that there was a way to get a lot more business if you could rank well on this thing called Google. Yes, I am probably original equipment on. When I started that business, there was no such thing as Google, so we had the Yellow Book. So by learning how to market my own company on there and making it to page one nationally for it, which was just amazing. And the phone never stopped ringing. I mean, it made the business of business easier to be able to do that. And the flip side to that was I found that I so much enjoyed the SEO process, the marketing online so much that kind of grabbed me and hooked me. So I started offering it to fellow businesses in my business park. And my first client ended up being bought by their competitor based on the fact that I was mimicking everything their competitor was doing. And they were just like neck and neck in the SERPs. And finally they said, and I know I was up against a full-fledged, SEO agency. So it was really kind of fun. And then from there, I just got nerdier and nerdier and nerdier.
Yeah.
And got into SEO testing in 2015. Was one of the original testers with Kyle Roof on the Lorem Ipsum.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, yeah, yeah. So we met at a conference, and he was telling me what he was doing, and used the word like, I was like, how are you testing? How do you know you're testing? And he's like, well, I find words that Google doesn't know, and then I put them on my pages, and then I change different things on my pages, and then I see how Google resorts them. So that lit a fire under me, because finally it was, I don't have to, prior to testing for me, you always hear the loudest person in the room, right? When you're talking in any kind of community. And, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're the only ones that know something.
No.
And so at that point, I remember in a forum, people were debating on, should your title be the same as your H1? It was around the time that I met Kyle. And so I said, do you think I could figure out the answer to this? And he's like, sure. So set up a test. And honestly, it was so long ago, I don't remember what the answer was. And I don't think it's the same, to be honest. And that's the thing about testing, is that you have to, you may find something is true at some point, and then it changes. And that kind of, I lived that, because around 21, August 2021, I started testing indexation. Because I could, it's frustrating, right? We optimize pages, we publish them. Sometimes Google would love them, sometimes Google would ignore them. And it's like, why? What's going on in there? And in 2021, Google turned off JavaScript. And I know enough now to say, like, maybe they turned it off, but maybe they were having trouble processing it. That could also explain what happened. But a lot of these heavy JavaScript sites were just dropping in the SERPs, like, heavy stones in the ocean. And nobody knew why, until we started testing to see why is this content going through that rendering crawl. Now, I didn't start looking at server logs until later, so I would love if anybody had server logs from March of 2021. Hello, hit me up. So starting testing indexation and doing it with minimally viable content to kind of find out where are the thresholds, where do you get in, where do you not get in. And I think a lot of times we think it's only on the strength of our content that we have success or not. And very clearly, we could see examples where it wasn't only our efforts, that, Google had to be working. Google had to be processing, they had to be crawling, they had to be able to index things. And there were a lot of crazy things, like, for instance, people may remember when you had a mobile designated site and then a desktop designated site. All that changed at mobile first indexing in November 2023. So it was, you could get, I was using two different types of sites, one mobile, one desktop, and I was getting different indexing results using very similar content, but I was getting a much easier result on the mobile first, mobile designated sites. So there were a lot of moving parts underneath the indexation system, and Google is not very often equal handed in what they do, certainly not between those two types of sites and using the different crawlers. So anyway, it was like I say, totally nerd to, I at first thought I was going to test every week, but then I found out so much was changing that once a week didn't suffice. It had to be every day. And that's when my life changed. So, but I still do that. I still test every indexation every day. And like with the indexing service, all of the data and the research from that went into building that ability to not just do it on a one-off, but to do it at more in scale so that I could offer it.
And you have both your Spotify podcast and you have your YouTube channel and you have your website also. You have your YouTube channel where I don't know if you're posting daily now, but there were a time actually where you were almost posting daily updates to Google indexing.
Yes,
are you still?
I was doing that for completely, labor of love out of it. And when we went to mobile first indexing, I shifted everything over to Substack. So I offer it now as a paid monthly. And that's where, all those reports now go instead of going to YouTube. But you're right. I was doing it every day for over 2 years, and it was fun. But it's nice too to kind of narrow it down because a lot of times it's useful to know, is it me or is it Google, right?
Yeah.
So,
John is asking, first of all, hello, Roman. Roman is also a well-known face. He also joined us at the XSEO conference last year as a speaker. And nice to see you, Roman. And John is asking, what is your Substack?
sure. It's if you search
Could
crawl,
if you
no crawl.
paste your link inside of the chat.
Oh,
so
yeah. But also I want some CTR, people. If you Google crawl or no crawl Substack, it'll be right in there. You'll see it. But I'll also put the link in here as well. But no crawl. But it's on Substack. There are accounts that you can either be a supporting member on there, which is paid. It's $18 a month, or you can be, free and just get the little crumbs that occasionally I push out. But those that pay, they get more customized reports. I call them for your eyes only kind of things, especially when things are happening underneath. And that's the thing is that, if you look at the ocean, sometimes it can look very flat. And then when you get underneath it, you start to see how much life is underneath there and how much movement and activity. And it's really true when you start getting away from, only trying to rank your own stuff and look and see what is going on. How does this work? What can I see, and how Search Console intersects with server logs, which ultimately intersects with, how your content gets in. And because everybody, I think, thinks that indexation is like, I Dream of Jeannie, pop, you're in. And the truth of the matter is it's very mechanical that, Google has to know that you've done something. So either you have to be proactive or you wait until Google comes around your way. And I know a lot of people go like, well, my content is so good, I'm going to wait for Google to discover it. And that's great, if you get a lot of traffic, because, when you hear Google talk about how to rank, they say, write good content, people will link to you, and they'll come and you'll bang, you don't have to do anything. But that's mostly because they don't have to do anything, right? They were born on third base and thought they hit a triple. But for the rest of us, we have to do things. We have to take some action, whether that's building backlinks to your backlinks or finding a way to submit your content to get it started. So, Bing has the, index now, which is great. They have a different philosophy than Google. Bing is very much, tell us what you've got. We want to crawl it. Tell us, right?
Yeah.
And Google is like, don't be pushy. We'll discover your stuff.
Yeah.
And so just keep writing good content and leave the driving to us.
Yeah. Exactly.
Which is kind of silly. But I did a test one time to see how long would it take for Google to kind of like, I updated something, updated the sitemap, but I always put the date. By the way, that's something if you have control over any aspect of where you're putting your content, make sure that you have the sitemap set up to where it also has the last updated date on there.
So Google actually reads. So for example, if you have a WordPress website and you can have, I think it's called last mod.
Yes.
That's the date. So
Yes.
what you're in essence, what you're saying is that if the last mod is relatively fresh, Google is going to look at this date when they're crawling your website, and then you're going to have a higher chance of getting indexed. Or
Yes. Yes.
With the last mod date.
And the other thing to do is, you can set the priority on the like when you're building your sitemap. Some of them also say what kind of priority. So one, and this was also discovered in testing, because as testers, we were constantly creating pages that Google did not know about. And we used to be able to do the one-off pages. We could just pop a domain up, write 2 pages of content and submit it through that little special doorway they had for everybody. And within 5 minutes, we had an answer because it was instantaneous, crawling, indexing, serving. So we found as testers that changed. And like we couldn't get our test pages indexed unless we had a privacy policy. And I noticed that in the server logs, without really being asked, they come a lot. Certainly at first, to kind of look and see what's your privacy policy on there. And so it's like, okay, so we got to put a privacy policy. And then we thought, well, if like terms of service. So we would make these test sites that were almost like business sites so that we could get our content indexed. And so, yeah, I mean, I know I'm going on and on about the testing piece, but yeah, those that was also something that we found out, that by setting the priority to 1, we could get all of our test pages indexed.
Does that still work with the priority? Is that still that you're using?
I haven't reverse tested that.
Okay.
But and that's a good point. That would be a good idea to do. Yeah. But I do think right now, in the reality of the SERPs, is Google is looking for any reason to chill out and not take in new content.
Yeah, they're using for any reason to not index you.
Right. It's like the college you want to get into, that everybody wants to get into. They're looking for ways to exclude you.
Yeah.
And so if you don't land right on that expectation mark, they might put you in like a different priority bucket.
Yeah.
So they'll get to you eventually, but probably not as fast as you want.
And have you seen any evidence at all in all of your testing experiments that writing or having AI written content on a page,
I knew you were going to ask me that,
negatively affects indexing? Have you seen any evidence of that?
Okay. So I would say specifically that question, no. However, we're not free of all the other rules, right? So if we are all going to the same well and pulling the same even outline of our content, and let's say similar niche, right?
Yeah.
That if a lot of people are putting out a lot of the same content, it's starting, and this is where I get into well, I'll just say it, that the syndication aspect of AI content, that if a lot of let's pick a niche, roofers are writing a lot of the same content, how to pick a contractor, how to dealing with your insurance company, whatever, that when you have the same sort of topical flow, that Google's going to be comparing that to what they already have. And so I think the tolerance for content that may, even if it uses different words, right? We all talk about duplicate content. Duplicate content and syndicated content are two different things. The duplicate content is when you have it on the same domain. I happen to think that falls into the helpful content set of criteria.
Yeah.
We don't have to go into that. But like if it's on the same domain, even if it's not verbatim word for word, that seems to be problematic. When it's on different domains, and again, it's not word for word, but the topical flow and everything is the same, I think that's what's hurting people. I think that's what people think, oh no, they found out I used AI. Well, no, I don't think the systems know that, but I think they can sense similarity and be able to, it's like if it's fresh and new and diverse, they'll, and diverse, not in the ways people think necessarily, but it's very, I think, easy for large systems like Google's processing that to connect the dots, and they're using, I think, AI to do so. So again, are people not successfully getting AI generated content indexed? Yes. Is it because it was AI generated? Not exactly. It's like if everybody went to the same copywriter.
Yeah, so it's not like they're not measuring, because we know that Google Gemini, they have the technology to actually footprint or watermark their own AI content. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it actually in the future it could actually mean that content produced by Google Gemini could actually get an advantage, because I mean they're detecting it's their own content. They might want to, for some reasons, to push their own content up. We don't know that, but they do have the technology to actually watermark, and they also have of course, they have the technology to detect it. But do they actually use that detection to anything? I haven't seen evidence of it either.
Right.
No.
I mean, I hear people crying about it, but I've never seen anybody show actual data that shows that. This is the same article, but I wrote it by a human. This is the same article as written by AI. It's still a case of Google comparing what they have.
Yeah.
And like, the same way it works with press releases, right? Which are identical word for word. They have a filter because they only want, they don't need 400 or 500 of the same.
Yeah, so I actually made an interesting observation, because I some months ago I posted an article on my own website, jespernissen.com, about some parasite SEO, and then I used ChatGPT to rewrite the article. I just put the text into ChatGPT, asked it to rewrite, and then I posted the rewritten on LinkedIn, and I posted one more rewritten word on Medium, and was a fourth place. I don't remember, but anyway, so I had it in 3 places, and And the thing is that, so actually LinkedIn pushed out my own article, and it also pushed out the Medium article. So first I got 3 results, then I got only 1 result. But then I discovered that because the title and the H1, the meta title or title and the H1 tag was identical on all 3 articles, even if it was, rewritten, it wouldn't index. So then I changed the title and the H1 on the 2 other articles, and they popped up again. So they have, besides content, they also have a filter for 2 identical. If your titles and H1s are 2 identical compared to what they have already in the SERPs, you're not going to be shown. You're going to be filtered out.
Well, and let's just say, like, those are 2 of the strongest zones on a page.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think there's also that first line of filtering.
Yeah.
Because, so it makes sense that, and again, if it's exact, they're going to be like, okay, we only need 1.
Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense to me that you modified it and they're like, great, come on in.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with this AI, and also how it affects how it can affect indexing, because although it's not a negative criteria per se that it's AI produced, I think that it does affect how they perceive indexing, because I mean they're getting flooded each day, each hour, each minute, each second. They're getting flooded with AI content, so they have to develop more rigorous quality criteria for content now. They've been forced to do so.
Well, and maybe they don't have to. Maybe this, because there are a lot of people that use AI and they don't modify it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you're just creating and publishing versus looking and seeing what's not in here,
Yeah.
that's a challenge. And then you got to think too, after a while, we are putting so much out on websites that suddenly, let's say on our own website, that suddenly it's like, well, diversity could come in and play a part, because maybe if you were to publish it on social media and generate traffic in through there, that, a lot of that can impact other things, right? It's not just that one piece of content, but then when they start to see traffic flooding in, that causes a certain reevaluation of, well, what else is here?
Yeah.
Because they're a jealous mistress. Google wants everything. Want all the traffic. So if you're getting it from somewhere else, it's like, what else is going on?
So just today, was it today or yesterday, I saw a post on social media. I almost see it daily, but I saw a post about how to get Web2 links indexed. Links from WordPress, or links from, if you put a link in a Reddit post, how do you get that indexed? Links like that. And do you have a recommendation? And this could actually lead us to talk about your own indexing service. Could you?
Well, I think anything where you can put a link that you believe you're going to get some traffic through, do it. Don't do it because you want that page indexed, but if it serves the conversation, like, why is everybody huddled around Reddit, right?
Yeah.
So, but anything you can do that enhances that experience, and if that's a link back to something that you've done, do it. But I think, if I may, the flip side to that is everyone takes their content and they put it, the same exact content, on a lot of different URLs, and they expect all of them to be indexed.
Yeah.
And that's not a reasonable expectation.
No.
based on today's search engines
No.
on that. So, but again, just the scale, like you say, of what Google is having to go through, they already know they're the 800-pound gorilla, right? They don't really, they're not worried so much about us. They only care that they have content that people come to Google and interact with, period.
Yeah.
So they can do whatever they want. They do not have to make a better mousetrap.
No.
On that. But I think what we can do is, okay, so let's just talk about this thing. I know that in SEO, the whole idea has been more backlinks wins.
Yeah. That seems to be, especially now, that seems to be the general idea that we need more backlinks.
Right. And what generally happens and what has been in some ways successful is not necessarily more, but more relevant ones, more relevant scenarios where people interact with that content, wherever that is, and then they click on a link to there, but at the very least, they're messing around with that page. And there's things in the patents. I'm not going to be able to quote chapter and verse on the patents, but, and just because it's in a patent doesn't mean that it's prevalent in the SERPs. But if you start to put your links in places where people will interact with the content that surrounds it, they start to weigh that content more importantly than, let's say, a similar page that has similar content but zero interaction.
Yeah.
So it goes back to, you know, put your stuff where people are.
Yeah.
And as SEOs, we don't always have that luxury, but we're very clever.
Yeah, but that represents a challenge if you're manually, if you don't have a big budget and you're building backlinks manually, you know, you're going to Google or ChatGPT, give me a list of 30 free do follow links, like Linktree or something like that. That's how I find my links, my free links. So when I'm building out, let's say 100 free do follow backlinks like that, it represents a challenge because I'm going to create these links and they're just actually being created on, you know, various platforms that are free.
Right.
How, I mean, they won't get any traffic. How do I circumvent that in order to get them indexed?
Well, you know, that is the challenge.
Yeah.
And it also brings the point that, you know, maybe 100 links isn't the answer. Right?
Yeah.
So the piece that and I'm exploring this now. And you've got Schema Writer.
Yeah.
Right. So it would be interesting to see if making the connections through the schema on these backlinks and not identical schema as well, like a part of it over here and another part of it over there. And then, you know, you're feeding Google the idea, because obviously I think we are aiming more towards the entity, the business entity aspect of things, right?
Yeah.
So it's very possible that what we're watching is like this evolution in the backlinking, so that it's not just the link anymore, but what if it's, you know, picking up organizational schema here and then service schema over there, but they're not all on the same page.
Yeah, that's actually extremely interesting. That's what I'm using Schema Writer. I built in an application in Schema Writer to make these schema iframes. So I'm building out a very comprehensive piece of schema. Then I'm building out these iframes that has the schema embedded. And then I'm taking this embed code for this iframe, and then I'm pasting it across, of course, all of my cloud stacks, cloud links. And I'm seeing it's working really, really well for local SEO, really well.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, also for maps. Yeah.
So in other words, I think if we were pushing out our concept of what the backlink does for us,
Yeah.
that really what we want is we want them to get crawled. And if it bears up with whatever criteria Google has right now for, that threshold, it'll make it in.
Yeah.
And it may not serve it, right? Because there's the index, and those bastards, they took out the cache. So we can't really even verify that. But in the old days, we could do that search for that URL in quotes. If we found it, we were like, okay, we know it's indexed, but we can't find it. It's not available by its keywords, but I know Google knows about it. So that's what we lost with the cache. Now they gained double their space, right? Because they didn't have to keep a backup of everything.
Yeah.
I'm sure they have a backup of everything, but it didn't have to keep it available to us.
Yeah.
For that.
Yeah.
So I think that is probably, again, that injects a little bit of diversity, right?
Yeah.
And the puzzle pieces, and I think solving that puzzle is probably a higher priority than crawling and indexing every link.
Yeah. So again, I want to return to your own indexing service because you recently launched or just launched your own indexing service. So could you explain what it is and
Sure.
what it does and how it works and how to subscribe to it, stuff like that?
Sure. Well, it's called IndexZilla, and it can be found at IndexZilla.io.
Yeah.
And the point to it is obviously for everyone to have the benefit of the things I've gleaned out of the last number of years as to what it takes to get Google to find your content, basically. And so we all have search consoles usually. Some people decide not to put theirs in, but Google knows about them. I appreciate having my hand on a steering wheel at least, where I can, submit the sitemap whenever I want to. Yeah. And but the idea is, thank you for putting that in there. The principle is very similar. You simply, there's different tiers of service depending on how many URLs you find yourself needing. And the goal is that we really have something for everybody, starting with a starter package. I think it's 1,000 URLs a month. And then moving up to enterprise, working on getting an API finalized. That's probably not going to be until beginning of next year on that. But then, the purpose of this is that obviously I'm still testing every day. And so one of the, I think, different things that differentiates this system and the platform is that if Google is shut down for whatever reason, I'm not going to explain the reason in there, but I'm going to say right now is not a good time. Or if you choose to, because it's a credit-based system.
Yeah.
So, and we've got it where it automatically, after 4 to 5 days, checks to see if the content testing is indexed on that.
Yeah.
there are a lot of, I do notice, certain things that do index easier than others. And so obviously too, part of that is uncovering what else is not getting indexed in there. And most recently, found out that there were URLs submitted that, and I'm sure you've heard this too, like, oh, these are public URLs, right? And everybody goes, yoo-hoo, let's get a public URL. But what they don't realize is it's also set as no index.
Yeah.
That the platform itself has set the no index button on it.
Yeah.
So you can submit public URLs.
Yeah.
But indexer is not going to break that rule.
It's it's not going to work. Yeah, I know that many of these the free Web 2 platforms, or not many, but some of these, they have this no index tag. So you can't either as a tag, or they have it in the robots.txt. So it's not going to index. Like you could create a link on, was it an IBM.com subdomain, or you could create a profile link, all these, or TEDx profile links. But many of these, they won't index because they know that people like us, we like to abuse it. Yeah.
We're not we're not self-disciplined to do so. But yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is that when Google is going to content, the very first thing it pulls is the robots text file.
Yeah.
So you can submit that one till the cows come home, and there's no way anything is going to change. But usually what I find is the difference being is word count and structure.
Yeah.
That and again, it makes sense because they're trying to not index everything in the kitchen sink. And they certainly don't want to serve it either. But if you have, 300, 350 words on a page, it's just not going to work. And it's not a failure of the indexation process. It's just that's like if you had access to it, and if it was a backlink and you had access to it in Search Console, and you would inspect that URL, it would probably tell you crawled, not indexed. And the reason being Google systems. Well, part of Google systems is that threshold, that if you're not higher than that threshold, you're going to hit that threshold and they're not going to let you in.
So are you saying that you have discovered that the word count in an article, or the word count in a Web 2 link, stuff like that, so the actual word count is some kind of threshold that you need to exceed some kind of minimum content volume on a page in order to increase the chance of getting indexed?
I would say I have data on that. Yes.
That's extremely interesting, actually.
So, and again, it doesn't mean that, because Google even says, if we find that a lot of people are discovering content, they will share it. But if you've just got a page out there and the only thing going for it, I don't know, is that it exists, that's not sufficient enough to get that content indexed, much less served. I do have something I want to tell you about.
What's that?
So, there's been a lot of stuff going around saying, you can index a page just with schema.
Yeah.
But it's like, the implication there is that it's a blank page, right? Yeah. Only schema. So I have a current test running where I was able to get a completely blank page, indexed. I can see it in Search Console. It's definitely indexed. But it is not served. The number, if I look at the, count the the words in the source code. You know, it's right around 300 words. So my next step is obviously going to be, all right, so I got it indexed. What's the threshold to getting it served and yet still blank? Not hidden, you know, it's like schema.
Yeah, only in schema, but do you have schema on this page or what?
Yeah, that's the only thing I have.
Web page schema and
I have a title, I have the schema.
Yeah.
The body is blank.
Yeah.
And then there's the end of the page.
I see. Okay.
It's tantalizingly cool.
That's very interesting, because some of the guys that or one of the guys that claims that he has a page that's actually ranking for a keyword. So when I went to inspect his page, he built something like 400 backlinks, and then he builds thousands of backlinks to these backlinks. So it did index, but it's not exactly only because of the schema. It also had millions of backlinks, you know.
Right. I mean,
so it's
right. Backlinks work.
Yeah.
We do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is a page has, in fact, the only thing I think I have is a self-referencing link in the code.
A self-referencing link.
Yeah, I have the URL.
Okay.
itself.
Yeah.
And I think that is hidden. That's not in the, I mean, it's in the schema in a way, but it's not in the schema. So it's outside of the schema, but no one can see it on the page. Because I thought, well, you know, I have seen things where self-referencing links are interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know that Google differentiates between it, and I don't know that it does. So there's a lot of questions.
I think that for several years, one of my go-to things when I did on-page manually was having a self-referencing clickable link in the content with the keyword that I wanted this page to rank for.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's just one of the things, because I think I heard Carl Roof talk about it, and it sounded like a good idea. So that's just what I did. But
yeah. And you remember the QR codes too?
Yeah.
The Google used to do that for us.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's all sorts of possibilities there. So I'll be adding on to that a little bit. But again, you know, it's this idea of I'm living in an indexation environment, and I have to say, I mean, it's been a dream of mine to have this where I could share it, you know, so that people could take advantage of it, and yet still keep going, because I think there's a lot of questions out there. And you know, again, I'll have like I am preparing like a mini course on indexation, just so that people understand the mechanics of it.
Yeah.
You know, you need to have a website that Google can find. Right. So you have to make sure you uncheck that box if you're in WordPress. And then you need to do certain things on that site. Sitemaps are huge. I'm a fan of in robots text files, instead of just listing the sitemap of sitemaps, you know, that has them all listed. I like to take them out of that. I mean, I'll put that one in there for sure, but then I will continue to list all the individual actual sitemaps in there.
So the actual URLs of the entire website, or what are you saying?
Well, what I'm saying is that, you know, like sitemap.xml might be contained with 4 separate XML files.
Yeah.
You know, pages, posts, categories, images, whatever.
They do that in WordPress with the various,
Right. So what I do is I might say sitemap.xml, but then it'll be post-sitemap.xml, page-sitemap.xml.
Okay. Yeah.
And so that, because I know how often they hit that robots text file. And that's an easy thing, right? It's nothing you have to think about every time, because especially if you're in some sort of website software, it's going to update those things.
What actually happens if you put citations inside of the robots.txt? Have you checked that? I mean, because we know that Google, they read the robots.txt and then they inspect all of these URLs. So if you put citations, backlinks pointing to your website inside of the robots.txt, shouldn't they actually read those links or visit them?
You know, I haven't found directly that they have, you know, because when you put it in there, you actually say it's a sitemap. So the robot.txt protocols kind of set a lot of that up, and they don't, from the last time I read them, which let me tell you was a couple of years ago. You know, I didn't see anything that kind of any wiggle room, shall we say, squishy parts to their to their protocols that would let me do it. Now, I do know like some people were trying to build backlinks to those robots text files, but they never saw any benefit to that.
I see. Yeah.
But you know, it's these little things. I think we spend a lot of time as SEOs trying to find that super powerful silver bullet I do once and I never have to worry again.
Yeah.
And I think nowadays it's probably worth the time to do these little tiny things that in and of themselves, they don't seem very large. They don't seem like they'd be that significant. But when they all start to add up together, you know, then truthfully, the easier you can make it to where Google can find these URLs, the better on your own site. And now, as far as your backlinks and cloud pages and all that kind of stuff, you are looking at potentially, you know, they might have filters on there for those sites. So the question then becomes, well, if they have filters on them, that means you can get them crawled, you can probably get them indexed, but can't really tell if they're indexed or not if they're not serving it.
No.
If you don't have them on Search Console. So a lot of times I did with my cloud stuff is I would put it into Search Console. You know, just do the site verification process on that. And then once you do it in there, then you do get some idea of what's indexed. And I know we can't do that for every possible backlink we might want to create. But even if you just had one or two that you had set up like that, you could see what that process is.
Yeah. You
know, you're not going to get logs or anything like that, but you are going to be able to see, okay, Google's crawled them, but they've indexed them, but they're not serving them.
Yeah.
And that's partially what's going to go in this mini course, is because, you know, we've used this word index to mean a lot of things. And I think when you're programming software, as you know, you can't recycle words and meanings. You have to be very precise or people don't know exactly what to look for or what to do. You know,
exactly.
So, but yeah, so the serving is where we are all really, that's where we make our money, is if Google serves it. The indexed is essential, because if it's not indexed, it's not going to help us at all. And if it's not indexed, they're likely never going to serve it. I haven't seen anything that shows me as not indexed, and yet I could find it. So, but
have you seen that? Does it help to get stuff indexed in Bing and Yahoo? As you know, if you want to get indexed in Google, does it help submitting it to get indexed in Bing and Yahoo? And I don't know if they're still in Alta Vista, but DuckDuckGo and all the other search engines.
they share a lot of stuff. Let me just say, like, I do put my stuff into Bing. Because one, you know, Bing's a little bit more keyword exact friendly. So in those cases, that's great. But I think anytime you are looking outside of Google to get people to come, is time well spent, because again, that's another form of diversity, right?
Yeah.
That again, like you were saying, if Google is going to put a watermark in their own content, they're also going to know where that traffic is coming from. I mean, when it comes to safe search, they know everything.
That's a good point, actually.
Yeah.
It's a very valid point. Yeah.
So
yeah, you were talking about safe search.
yeah, I mean, they know they're in our bank account before we are, so they know where their traffic is coming from.
Yeah.
So if they see stuff coming from Bing and DuckDuckGo and all that kind of stuff, and you know, I know I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said before, but it's like I see diversity as a huge potential, kind of like, you know, we always talk about tripwires and things. So like if you start to, there's probably like if all your traffic is only from Google, that's probably a tripwire. Then after a period of time, it's not like day one, all your traffic comes from Google, you're out. But I mean, like once it's been tracked,
yeah,
and that, you know, they don't see anything else. Like this is why I think it's essential people build a business.
Yeah.
So if you've got a newsletter,
yeah,
an email list,
yeah,
things that you can push out there that, you know, some little crafty things you can do with those links inside of those things. But that's going to show as not coming from a search engine.
I think that all of these things that you're talking about, it's a good idea to create a mailing list, a YouTube channel, a following social media, and all of those things would be kind of, if not difficult, if not impossible to do if you're doing only affiliate websites. I mean,
Yeah, affiliates are getting
if you're
killed.
only working in affiliate SEO, affiliate marketing, this makes it extremely difficult.
Well, I think the days of people throwing up a 10,000 page site about, I don't know, aquarium equipment,
Yeah,
and not having any forms on there, only affiliate links, that kind of stuff.
yeah,
You know, and it's just not good business, right? You go to a lot of work to get that visitor to come.
yeah.
You ought to have something that they want in exchange for how to reach out to them, and then put a newsletter together. I mean, but see, that's against the affiliate lifestyle, right? I want to sit on the beach and I don't want to think about it anymore after I plashed it up.
Yeah.
So, but I think nowadays, if you're going to do this, you have to approach it like a business.
And
I feel bad for affiliates. Don't get me wrong. I'm not being heartless and cruel, but I'm just thinking you got to evolve with the times.
I think the affiliate model is extremely difficult right now. And I don't think that I don't see it actually returning anytime soon. Not the way that Google has evolved their indexing systems. I wanna ask you about something else related to indexing, because now you have your own indexing service, and obviously now I subscribe to your service and I'm going to try that and use that. But I've used a ton of other indexing services: Index Me Now, Speedlinks, Rapid URL Indexer, Synbyte, you know, and the guys on Telegram, and you know, many indexing services. And a lot of these indexing services, they used or abused the Google API indexing.
Yeah.
And what's your thought of that kind of indexing right now?
Well, I have more than thoughts. I actually have data. And one of the things that changed, not just at the announcement, but slightly before, is if you have the API set up, you know, and you can log into like your cloud service account, you know, if you set that up on your own site, and you could request content to be indexed and you'd see it execute. When you go to the server logs, no bot arrived, 0.
Okay.
So they disconnected the API from the crawling system as a whole. So even though people are using these services and I know a lot of them are shifting towards only, like talking about Bing and Index Now and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the API stopped working quite a while ago, and it was not sending the bots. And I know there's been a lot of services that went out for that. And the thing about IndexZilla is that it is not based on that, because I saw that it was all these tools kind of like came out, and I thought, oh man, dream of an indexing service.
Yeah.
But it's like when you build it on that and Google has control of that, they can do whatever they want with it. It's their API, it's not ours. And so I felt it was prudent to build it on something that was on the principles of indexation. And so there are no, there really, it's really just being in the right place at the right time and watching and seeing what happens.
Yeah.
And then creating an environment where that happens.
Yeah.
And so that's what IndexZilla does. And again, we've got there's I think 6 levels, and if people want to try it out, there's a tier that you can sign up for. You get 25 URLs, and they're good for the month, and then you can subscribe if you're happy with the results. So you don't have to believe me. Now, I will tell you that, I've had some people reach out and say, hey, I'm not quite sure, but, I'm not getting full indexation. And so they allow me to go and look and see what they're trying to get indexed. And like I say, the main reasons are word count, structure. They have a no index label. Some of them have HTML that is invalid. And especially in those really high value, we talked about the title and the H1.
Yeah.
Those are huge.
Yeah.
I did a presentation this past summer where I showed it was like one of those networks. It was porn, but they normally, when as SEOs, if we're in work, we're trying to make things more and more and more relevant. These guys took a complete 180. They became completely unrelevant. And they removed everything. They had no titles. They had no H1s, and they just had links, and they couldn't get anything indexed. 0. So that told me that these things are essential when it comes to Google understanding, to know enough to know if they need to index you or not. Yeah. So if you've got invalid HTML code, that's a problem. So, but when I'm looking at all of this, it's like those that have a proper, an article length, whether it's on their own site or on something else, they're getting indexation. So it's kind of like if you provide whatever platform it's on, if you provide what Google wants, and there's no hindrance by Google to that platform, like we know that S3 got abused so much to where it's not trusted anymore. So if you're not dealing with that and you're putting the content out on these other platforms, you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
So
I think this is extremely interesting with the word count. The word count and the schema, I'm going to experiment on using that much more, especially with the word count, because it actually explains why when you're building up profile links on pages, websites that allow you to create a profile with a do follow link or no follow back to your website, it actually kind of explains why they are not getting indexed, because Google doesn't know where to put them. If you didn't put any text and you only put your name and your business name and your business address and your business website, but no context, no long description of what you're doing, they won't get indexed.
Right. Right. I mean, that they've said very clearly, not everything is going to be indexed. Not everything on Amazon is indexed.
No. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like, and I understand about the profiles, because that's immediately when I started finding, these thresholds, just like, well, that means that could explain why suddenly, like, everybody says, well, I did the same thing, back in 2010.
Yeah.
And obviously I need to do more because it's not as strong as it used to be. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the thing. It's like the real insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different result.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Some things just don't work like they did.
Yeah. Yeah, that's extremely interesting. I think that we now passed 1 hour, Carolyn.
Oh
So
my goodness.
I don't see any questions from the participants. So if anybody has any question, feel free to ask it now. And I think that we should wrap it up. So could you come with some 2-3 tips, or just to summarize, what do we need to do? Yeah, so John is asking, you mentioned the mini course.
Yes, I'm going to put that on IndexZilla on there. I'm also going to put in the chat, there's everybody, Jesper is so nice to let me come and do this. So I'd like to send a little gift back. There's a thing where it says crawl or no crawl Substack, and then there's a little code. And what that is that would let you go to a page where you can get a 7-day free trial on crawl or no crawl. Expect it's going to be, it's not a lot of reading. I don't send out like a book every day, but I do sort of talk about indexation in the more instant, like what you might be experiencing today. And then just keeping IndexZilla in there as well. So you have that if you're curious, you can do the free trial on there, and you just have those 25 URLs and knock yourself out on that. So, but it's really thank everybody for being here.
Yeah. Thank you guys for being here, and thank you, Carolyn. I'm going to stop the recording now. Good. And just hold on. I'm just going to see if that means that the streaming stops. Let's see here.